What do you consider the most important benefits, risks and governance challenges of clinical research that involves germline genome editing?
So I'm Robin Lovell. I'm a scientist working at the pharmacist Crick Institute in London on aspects of genetics, stem cell biology and embryonic development. So the possibilities of doing germline genome editing to allow patients to have children unaffected from genetic disease is really, really exciting. But we have to be careful because that excitement could lead to hype, and it could lead to premature use of the technology to where patients or couples wanting to have a child without a genetic disease travel to places, to clinics which are not following best practice, not following proper protocols of understanding and they don't understand the risks associated with the use of the technology, and these sort of unproven treatments we're used to in the stem cell field, where there are many clinics operating in many countries offering rather dubious treatments for a whole range of diseases. And the problem being that there is no way to really know whether the treatments that have been done have had any benefit or not, because there's often very little description or follow-up of the methods and of the patients themselves. And so you could easily imagine the same sort of thing happening in the genome editing field, where either unscrupulous clinicians offer treatments, or misguided clinicians who don't have necessary enough knowledge offer treatments to patients who are, of course, desperate for some reason to have a child without a genetic disease. Often these patients will be desperate and are willing to pay probably substantial sums of money to do this. So we have to be very careful when we're talking about the potential benefits, not to encourage people to undergo premature treatments.
What problems do you expect to emerge from global differences in regulatory rules and regulatory cultures in this technology field?
The UK government, I think personally, needs to face up to this issue already and actually start thinking about what sort of form the regulations would take to govern this whole area of potential clinical practice. It's very clear we're not ready yet. There's still lots of issues that would need to be sorted out. But it's important to have, I think, to have government starting to think about this now as an issue. And the UK is very good at regulation in this domain, particularly with the HFEA as an example. And it could easily set an example to the rest of the world of how best to conduct research and regulate clinical practice in this whole area. Accompanied with that, there has to be appropriate, robust public engagement exercises where you really get to not only give the information to the public, but of course get the feedback from the public, what they think might be useful, what might be acceptable, and where are the limits, because of course there have to be limits applied to the use of this technology, because there are potential uses which are clearly beneficial to avoid having a serious genetic disease. But it's a whole spectrum going to more trivial applications, or even forms of enhancement which would be really unhelpful and potentially lead to a public rejection of the whole notion, even though there are potentially very good benefits from it. So I think of course there's always going to be disagreement when you're looking at a global level. Different countries have different ways of regulating clinical practice and research to some extent. You're never going to get universal laws governing application of germline genome editing technologies. I think that's fine. I don't mind if some countries don't want to choose not to do it. Other countries will choose to do it. But what you really want is to have appropriate standards, at least, and so agreement from different countries on the standards that might apply if this technology is to go ahead. And I think it's very, there have already been attempts to come up with a list of criteria that would have to apply for any particular application of the technology to be used, to be applied in the clinic. And I think getting international agreement on those criteria, even if the country doesn't choose to go down that route, is feasible, and that's what I would like to see. So I think it's sort of best practice for the research, best practice for governing any clinical application, and what's important is that at least in the early stages, of course, any attempt to carry out germline genome editing, you need that information to be made publicly available so that both patients can learn from people's experiences, but of course, importantly, the scientists and clinicians can learn how to improve the methods, how to make them safer and more efficient.